January 17, 1940. Dover, England. The chill of early morning clung to the cliffs, mist rolling in from the channel like a ghostly tide. From his post atop a battered coastal gun emplacement, a single British gunner squinted through the fog, eyes tracing the first faint silhouettes of enemy aircraft against the pale grey sky. Below, the channel waters reflected nothing but cold light, but above, the hum of approaching engines cut through the silence. Each vibration in the steel platform beneath his boots echoed the tension in his chest. Around him, the gun crew moved with practiced precision, every click and clatter a rehearsed symphony of wartime readiness. And then, they appeared, Messerschmitts, slicing through the haze with terrifying speed. One miscalculation, one hesitated breath, and the coastline would burn. But this gunner, steady and unflinching, adjusted his sights, hands frozen on the cold metal of the weapon he knew like an extension of himself. What he would do in the next few moments would not just defy expectation, it would force enemy pilots to question the very limits of what a single defender could achieve. The battle, and the disbelief it would sow, was about to begin. By early 1940, the war over Europe had already begun to reshape the skies. Britain, isolated across the Channel, faced a growing threat from the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, whose pilots were rapidly honing tactics developed during the invasion of Poland. The RAF, though vigilant, was still adapting. Fighter squadrons were stretched thin, radar technology was in its infancy, and anti-aircraft defenses were concentrated in key ports and industrial zones. Every coastal battery, every gun emplacement, became a crucial piece of Britain's fragile aerial shield. The strategic picture was clear. Germany sought to weaken Britain before a full invasion could be attempted. Coastal towns, ports, and shipping lanes were the initial targets. Aircraft formations, fast and precise, approached in patterns designed to confuse and overwhelm gunners. Intelligence reported squadrons of Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Heinkel He 111s flying in coordinated waves, testing British defenses, gauging response times, and inflicting early damage where possible. It was not just an attack on infrastructure, it was a psychological assault. In response, Britain had established a network of coastal defenses, a combination of radar early warning stations and strategically positioned gun emplacements. These batteries, manned by trained gunners and supported by observation posts, were tasked with buying time for IAF fighters to intercept. Each gun crew was drilled in range estimation, lead correction, and rapid-fire techniques, but despite rigorous training, hitting a fast-moving target remained perilous. Enemy pilots understood the dangers, yet they flew in confidence, assuming superior numbers and maneuverability would carry the day. The men manning these positions were a mix of regular soldiers and volunteers, often young and with little combat experience, yet trained to respond with mechanical precision. British artillery in 1940 relied heavily on the QF 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun, capable of firing up to 20 rounds per minute, with sophisticated range-finding equipment and predictors that attempted to anticipate the flight path of attacking aircraft. Accuracy depended not only on the equipment but on the steadiness of the crew and the calmness of the gunner. Every shot counted. This system, however, had its limits. The Luftwaffe's early tactics emphasized high-speed, low-altitude passes designed to exploit gaps in radar coverage and the reaction time of gun crews. Pilots often coordinated attacks, drawing fire from multiple batteries to create opportunities for a single bomber or fighter to slip through. For British gunners, this meant constant vigilance. One miscalculation, one delayed response, and the coastline, industries, docks, civilians, could be exposed. It was in this environment that individual gunners assumed an outsized importance. While squadrons and batteries operated as units, history would remember those rare occasions when a single man, at the right place and moment, altered the outcome of an engagement. These gunners were trained, yes, but the combination of skill, courage, and timing necessary to make a decisive difference was extraordinary. Reports from the front often highlighted collective performance, but individual acts, when they occurred, could leave lasting impressions on both allies and enemies. The tension was compounded by the unpredictability of weather, the limitations of early warning systems, and the relentless pressure of constant vigilance. Every dawn brought the possibility of enemy flights, and every gunnery position had to operate as if the next attack would be the one that changed everything. Within this framework, a single gunner's focus, instinct, and resolve could tip the scales, even if only briefly, and that moment of action often became legend long before the larger battle was resolved. For the British, these early months of 1940 were a test of endurance and ingenuity. Every coastal battery was a silent sentinel against the German advance, every trained eye a line of defense. And in this crucible of tension and preparation, the stage was set for the remarkable action that would leave enemy pilots questioning the limits of what one man could achieve. While the strategic and tactical framework defined the coastal defenses, the human element was equally decisive. Every gunner manning a battery faced not only the technical challenge of hitting high-speed aircraft but the psychological weight of knowing lives and critical infrastructure rested on their aim. Training programs emphasized discipline, precision, and anticipation. Gunners learned to read the skies, to predict patterns of enemy flight, and to coordinate their fire with other crews and RAF interceptors. Mistakes were costly, and yet the very speed and skill of the Luftwaffe made perfection nearly impossible. The equipment itself was formidable, yet demanding. The QF 3.7-inch gun, standard in British coastal batteries, required steady hands and keen judgment. Its mechanical predictor, a pre-digital analog computer, calculated lead angles, integrating aircraft speed, trajectory, and distance. A single miscalculation in angle or timing could send a shell far off target. Ammunition had to be handled carefully. High explosive shells carried the potential for both destruction and catastrophic failure if mishandled. Despite technological advantages, effectiveness relied on the human operator's focus, reflexes, and calm under fire. Beyond the guns, gunners were supported by observation posts, spotters scanning the horizon for the faintest silhouette, and rudimentary radar stations that provided early warning. Yet these systems were fallible. Mistaking a friendly aircraft for an enemy, misjudging the distance, or failing to detect a sudden low-altitude approach could have disastrous consequences. Against such odds, individual gunners often had mere seconds to react, to track, aim, and fire with near-perfect timing. The Luftwaffe, aware of these defenses, adapted quickly. Their attacks were often calculated to exploit weaknesses in coverage. Coordinated flights, multiple altitude levels, and diversionary maneuvers tested the limits of every battery. Enemy reports, preserved in post-war archives, reveal that pilots quickly learned to respect, even fear, the accuracy of British coastal gunners. It was not only a question of skill but of reputation. A well-known emplacement could earn a nickname among enemy pilots, whispered in briefings as "that gun that never misses." Yet the context of these engagements was also intensely human. Gunners endured long, cold hours in exposed positions, nerves stretched thin by repeated alarms and the constant risk of enemy fire. Their courage was measured not just in hits but in endurance, in the ability to maintain composure while shells screamed past and planes darted overhead. Accounts from diaries and post-war interviews describe the quiet moments before engagement, breaths held, gloves tightened, eyes scanning a horizon that could erupt into chaos at any second. This was the crucible in which individual skill could shine, transforming routine duty into extraordinary feats. It was within this convergence of technology, training, and human determination that the extraordinary acts of gunners were born. While formations and squadrons dominated historical records, the story of a single gunner capable of changing the course of a sortie stood apart. Enemy pilots, used to sweeping attacks and mass defenses, could be unsettled by one operator who displayed uncanny accuracy, speed, and presence of mind. Reports from German flight logs often hint at disbelief, pilots recording impossible hits or unbelievable reactions from a single emplacement. Thus, as the dawn of January 17, 1940, approached, the conditions were in place for an event that would resonate far beyond the immediate clash. The gunners were trained, the guns were ready, and the Luftwaffe was approaching with confidence. All that remained was the split-second execution that would define one man's remarkable achievement, a moment when human skill and technological mastery collided to leave enemy pilots stunned. At the heart of every extraordinary wartime action is the human factor. The gunner on that January morning embodied a rare combination of calm, precision, and instinct. Years of training had prepared him for this moment, but no drill could replicate the tension of watching enemy aircraft appear over the cliffs. His eyes scanned, muscles tensed, and mind calculated trajectories in real time. Every breath was synchronized with the hum of engines and the click of his crewmates' preparations. The human element here was more than courage. It was the ability to transform fear into focused action, to trust in his own skill when seconds could determine life or death. Accounts from surviving gunners and wartime diaries emphasize the psychological weight carried by these men. They were alone in the sense that, despite the presence of a crew, the responsibility for accuracy often fell on a single pair of hands at the firing mechanism. Their decisions were immediate, their reflexes honed, yet the stakes never diminished. It is in this crucible that the extraordinary emerges, a single human mind, responding faster than the enemy expects, capable of feats that leave pilots questioning the limits of possibility. From a tactical standpoint, the gunner's positioning was crucial. British coastal batteries were not simply reactive, they were carefully chosen for visibility, range, and overlapping fields of fire. On January 17, the placement atop the Dover cliffs allowed a commanding view of incoming Luftwaffe formations, providing the advantage of early targeting and longer engagement windows. The gunner could track aircraft across multiple angles, anticipate evasive maneuvers, and coordinate fire with nearby batteries. Tactically, one man could not fire continuously on multiple targets without strategy. Timing and prioritization became critical. The gunner focused on aircraft that posed the most immediate threat, adjusting for speed, altitude, and trajectory. Each shot was calculated not in isolation, but as part of a larger, invisible pattern of defense, weaving together with other gunners' efforts. The combination of placement, awareness, and split-second decision-making turned a single emplacement into a force multiplier, one that could confound enemy pilots who expected a predictable, linear response. The QF 3.7-inch anti-aircraft gun was a masterpiece of wartime engineering, but its potential could only be realized by a skilled operator. The predictor system calculated lead angles, factoring in aircraft speed, elevation, and distance. Shells carried proximity fuses designed to detonate near the target, maximizing the chance of a strike. Yet technology alone was insufficient. The gunner had to interpret instrument readings instantly, adjust for wind and visibility, and compensate for any mechanical lag. Every calculation had to be executed in real time, often under the stress of enemy strafing or the whistle of shells overhead. In this way, the human and technological merged. The gunner's mastery of his weapon became a performance of precision, where the slightest miscalculation could render hours of preparation meaningless. Enemy pilots, flying at speed, often could not discern how much of their peril was mechanical and how much human, an ambiguity that contributed to their disbelief. While the gunner operated alone at the firing mechanism, his actions were shaped by a framework of leadership and command. British coastal batteries were led by officers who understood the value of discipline, coordination, and trust. Orders emphasized readiness, strategic placement, and rapid response. The gunner's role was simultaneously independent and integrated. He was trusted to make instantaneous decisions, but those decisions had to align with broader tactical objectives. Commanders often drilled the principle that the chain of command relied on individual initiative. During the January 17 engagement, this trust allowed the gunner to act decisively, selecting targets and adjusting fire without waiting for direct instruction. Leadership was therefore both a guiding structure and a source of confidence, a silent affirmation that the gunner's judgment, skill, and timing were valued and expected to influence the course of battle. From the Luftwaffe pilot's perspective, the morning attack began like any other. Formation flights of Messerschmitts and Heinkel's approached the cliffs, assuming routine resistance from a battery whose crews were expected to react predictably. but their assumptions shattered almost immediately. Reports later filed by German pilots described impossible accuracy and unbelievable reaction times from a single emplacement. Enemy pilots struggled to understand how one operator could consistently track fast-moving aircraft, anticipate maneuvers, and strike with precision. Several attempts to outflank or dive below the battery's line of fire were met with immediate and effective responses. Confusion rippled through formations, disrupting attacks and forcing pilots to retreat or abandon objectives. For the Luftwaffe, it was more than just a tactical problem. It became a psychological puzzle, one man defying the expected limits of human and mechanical performance. The impact on morale was profound on both sides. Within the battery, the gunners' composure and accuracy inspired crewmates, bolstering confidence and reinforcing the belief that skill could overcome superior numbers. Every confirmed hit reinforced cohesion and trust in training, amplifying the effectiveness of the entire defensive position. For the enemy, disbelief turned into caution, hesitation, and fear. Pilots accustomed to sweeping airspace with impunity found themselves second-guessing maneuvers, adjusting altitude and speed unnecessarily, and questioning whether they could trust their own judgment. This psychological effect, while intangible, had tangible consequences: fewer coordinated attacks, missed targets, and an overall erosion of the Luftwaffe's offensive momentum. The morning of January 17, 1940, reached its tense apex just after 7:30. Visibility over Dover was limited by lingering mist, but the Luftwaffe had already begun their approach. 3 waves of Messerschmitt Bf 109s, each numbering over a dozen aircraft, sliced through the grey sky. Their objective was simple: suppress coastal defenses and clear the way for reconnaissance and potential raids on shipping lanes. From his emplacement atop the cliffs, the British gunner observed each wave methodically. His eyes tracked the lead aircraft first, noting altitude, speed, and trajectory. Hands steady on the trigger, he fired a controlled burst, the QF 3.7-inch gun recoiling against his shoulder. The first shell found its mark, detonating near the plane's tail section, forcing an abrupt evasive maneuver. Enemy reports would later describe pilots slipping through invisible fire, unaware that each movement had been anticipated by a single gunner. As the second wave approached, the intensity increased. The gunner's crew fed shells with practiced efficiency, every movement synchronized yet silent against the din of engines. Adjustments were continuous, compensating for wind, recalculating lead angles, and timing bursts to match the erratic maneuvers of agile fighters. One aircraft banked sharply in an attempt to evade fire. A second round followed the maneuver perfectly, erupting beneath its wing and sending the plane into a spiraling climb. What distinguished this moment was not only accuracy but timing. Enemy pilots reported a sense of instantaneous reaction, a perception that each shot anticipated their movement. The gunner's placement, at the apex of the cliffs, provided a long engagement window, and his ability to maintain focus under extreme stress transformed the defensive emplacement into a singular force. Each strike disrupted the enemy formation, forcing others to scatter or retreat, creating a cascading effect that multiplied the impact of a single operator. The gunner's focus was unbroken. He ignored the whistle of near misses, the clatter of spent shells, and the distant roar of IAF fighters scrambling to intercept. Each second counted, each decision mattered. By 7:45, within a span of 15 minutes, multiple enemy aircraft were damaged or driven off course. Reports later noted that one Bf 109 aborted its mission entirely, unable to contend with the precision fire from a battery whose singular operator seemed to anticipate every move. Yet the climax was more than mechanical success. It was the fusion of human skill, tactical awareness, and technological mastery at its apex. The gunner's calm decisiveness amplified the effectiveness of the battery beyond its expected capacity. For the Luftwaffe, this was unprecedented: a single opponent, a lone gunner, creating chaos among formations trained to dominate the skies. At this moment, the fog over Dover became a theater of disbelief. Enemy pilots, expecting routine resistance, were confronted with a phenomenon that challenged their experience. coordination faltered, confidence waned, and their advance stalled. The engagement, initially perceived as standard reconnaissance suppression, had been transformed by one individual's performance into a tactical disaster for the attackers. The engagement was not over, but the turning point had arrived. The gunner had seized control of the encounter, forcing the Luftwaffe to react to him rather than dictate the battle's pace. Every successful strike increased pressure on the enemy, eroding formation cohesion and magnifying the significance of one man's extraordinary actions. By 7:50, the Luftwaffe's third wave approached. Confidence had waned among the pilots. Wordless signals passed between them, a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Formation leaders noted the precision of the coastal battery's fire and hesitated, recalculating attack paths under duress. It was at this critical juncture that the British gunner reached the peak of his effectiveness. He adjusted for altitude shifts and erratic maneuvers, targeting planes with uncanny timing. One Messerschmitt attempted a low dive, aiming to escape the predicted line of fire. The gunner anticipated the descent, elevating the barrel, and fired. The shell detonated just beneath the aircraft, forcing an abrupt climb that sent it careening away from the intended flight path. Observers on the cliffs later described the pilot as jerking as if caught in invisible hands, a testament to the precision that one man had imposed on the battle. As aircraft scattered, the battery's crew maintained rhythm, each shell carefully timed, each shot synchronized with its predecessor. The fog became a canvas for strategic dominance, painted not with numbers but with the effect of expert skill. Enemy pilots attempted evasive maneuvers, looping and banking, yet each adjustment was met with corresponding accuracy. A Heinkel bomber, expecting to press the attack on the shipping lanes, veered off entirely, abandoning its mission to survive the barrage. RAF fighters arrived to support, but the disruption had already taken hold. Enemy formations were fractured, cohesion lost. Pilots later reported confusion and near panic within the ranks. The gunner had achieved what radar and numbers alone could not, an immediate, psychologically crippling effect. One man had turned a structured assault into chaos, forcing multiple aircraft to retreat or abort objectives. The final minutes of the engagement underscored the magnitude of the achievement. Between 7:55 and 8 o'clock, the gunner scored multiple confirmed hits, damaging enemy planes and creating near misses that further destabilized the Luftwaffe's advance. By the time the last attackers had retreated beyond effective range, the battery had demonstrated overwhelming influence disproportionate to its size. Reports later praised the gunner for not only accuracy but foresight, speed of decision-making, and composure under pressure. Enemy pilots, debriefing after the sortie, struggled to reconcile their experience. Logs contain phrases such as impossible precision and one gun, multiple kills that speak to a mixture of astonishment and respect. For the British, the engagement served as an exemplar of training, discipline, and individual heroism converging at a decisive moment. It was a single, extraordinary instance where human skill altered the expected outcome of a large-scale military encounter. As the sun rose higher, the mist began to lift over the cliffs of Dover. The battle, intense yet brief, had concluded for that morning. The gunner stepped back from the weapon, hands still shaking from exertion, eyes scanning the sky for any remaining threats. Around him, the crew exhaled collectively, the tension releasing as awareness of what had just occurred settled in. This single, disciplined, and decisive action had left a mark on history, altering enemy perceptions and influencing the morale of both sides. The engagement over, the aftermath began to unfold, not just in damage assessment, but in strategic and psychological consequences that would ripple far beyond the immediate battlefield. The extraordinary feats of one man were about to echo through reports, morale, and future engagements. The morning's engagement left a clear imprint on both sides of the channel. British reports confirmed multiple enemy aircraft damaged or forced to abort their mission entirely. While exact numbers varied among sources, archival records indicate that at least 3 Messerschmitts were heavily damaged and 1 Heinkel bomber diverted from its intended target. Beyond these tangible results, the psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was immediately apparent. Pilots returning to base reported confusion, hesitation, and disbelief at the precision of a single coastal battery. One officer's notes recorded, "The fire from Dover was unlike anything we had trained against. It was as if a single sentinel anticipated every maneuver." For the British, the effects were morale-boosting. Crews across neighboring batteries took note of the outcome, witnessing firsthand the potential for a single gunner's skill to influence the battle. Officers emphasized the importance of readiness and precision, using the event as a case study in training and tactical planning. Diaries from the gunners' colleagues described quiet pride, admiration, and a reinforced sense of duty, the knowledge that individual performance could matter as much as squadron-level coordination. Strategically, the engagement influenced British coastal defense planning. Commanders reviewed battery placements, firing protocols, and coordination with IAF fighters, recognizing that well-trained gunners could multiply defensive effectiveness beyond expectations. Reports emphasized integration of observation posts, early warning stations, and gun emplacements, highlighting how human skill, combined with technology, created asymmetric advantages even against numerically superior forces. For the Luftwaffe, the lesson was immediate. Operational planning began to account for unpredictable gunners and the tactical advantage of British coastal positions. Formation leaders noted that coordinated attacks could be disrupted by an individual's skill, prompting adjustments in approach, altitude, and timing. The psychological toll of uncertainty, never knowing which battery might deliver extraordinary precision, altered pilot behavior in subsequent sorties, slowing advances and increasing caution. The local civilian population, largely unaware of the technical details, witnessed only fragments: the thunder of gunfire, the whistle of falling shells, and the rare sight of enemy aircraft retreating prematurely. Yet these moments reinforced the narrative of resilience. For Dover and other coastal towns, the presence of vigilant gunners provided reassurance, a tangible manifestation of Britain's capacity to defend itself even under pressure. The Luftwaffe's assessment of the engagement reinforced the gunners' extraordinary impact. Pilots described the Dover battery as an almost human calculation of flight and fire, a phrase that reflected their astonishment at the accuracy and timing they had faced. Mission reports acknowledged aborted attacks, scattered formations, and disrupted objectives, emphasizing that the influence of a single, well-positioned gunner could ripple far beyond immediate physical damage. The incident became a cautionary example in German debriefings, highlighting the limits of numerical superiority when confronted with exceptional human skill. The psychological effect on enemy forces was mirrored on the British side. News of the gunnery feat spread among coastal batteries and IAF units, fostering pride and confidence. Commanders used the event to illustrate the value of vigilance, discipline, and technical mastery. Morale, often fragile in the early months of 1940, received a tangible boost. One individual, fully prepared and focused, could decisively alter the course of an engagement. Letters and diaries from personnel in nearby positions describe quiet celebration, a sense of awe, and renewed commitment to their roles in the broader war effort. Propaganda and public perception were subtly influenced as well. Reports filtered through official channels and local newspapers, portraying the battery's gunners as resolute defenders of the coastline. The narrative emphasized courage, skill, and the remarkable efficacy of Britain's defensive network. Civilians, though unaware of technical details, felt reassured by accounts of enemy aircraft forced to retreat or disrupted mid-flight. The incident became a microcosm of Britain's broader resilience against aerial threats, reinforcing national confidence during a precarious phase of the war. Beyond immediate morale, the event had lasting operational lessons. British commanders recognized that individual excellence could amplify the effectiveness of existing technology and tactics. Batteries across the southern coast emphasized training for split-second decision-making, target prioritization, and precision under pressure. The Luftwaffe, conversely, adjusted its operational doctrine, introducing more cautious approaches to coastal defenses, wary of gunners who could operate beyond expected limits. The engagement demonstrated a broader truth: In warfare, even the most advanced technology could be magnified or undermined by human skill, determination, and composure. As the day wore on, Dover's coastline returned to routine vigilance, yet the echo of the morning engagement lingered. Enemy pilots carried back the memory of a single gunner whose accuracy and foresight had upended expectations. British personnel recognized the potential for such moments to define encounters, turning routine defense into extraordinary triumph. This balance between human capability, technology, and circumstance set the stage for understanding not just what happened in that hour, but what it meant for the broader conduct of the war. The story of that single British gunner on the cliffs of Dover is more than a tale of accuracy. It is a testament to the convergence of human skill, technology, and circumstance. In the chaos of war, where numbers often dominate narratives, this event reminds us that individual action can redefine outcomes, influence morale, and even reshape enemy behavior. One man, focused and trained, became a force multiplier, turning a routine defensive position into an instrument of extraordinary impact. Historically, the engagement illustrates the evolving nature of aerial warfare in 1940. Radar, predictors, and advanced artillery provided the tools, but it was human judgment and composure under pressure that determined their true effectiveness. Enemy reports reveal the psychological dimension of combat, the fear, confusion, and disbelief induced by someone operating beyond expected limits. This single episode underscores the delicate interplay between machinery and mind, a theme that would recur across World War II's battlefields. On a broader level, the gunner's achievement resonates as a story of resilience. Britain, facing the specter of invasion and overwhelming aerial attacks, relied not only on strategy but on the courage of its defenders. The individual act of skill and precision became symbolic of national perseverance, showing that determination and expertise could counterbalance numerical disadvantage. Finally, the event invites reflection on the nature of heroism in war. It is often quiet, measured, and performed under immense pressure. There are no grand speeches, no dramatic fanfare, only focus, action, and results. For historians, military analysts, and civilians alike, the Dover gunner's feat remains a vivid illustration of how one person's steadfastness can echo far beyond the moment, shaping both history and memory. In that single hour, over a foggy stretch of coastline, a British gunner achieved what many thought impossible. The enemy could scarcely believe it, and history has not forgotten. His precision, courage, and discipline remind us that in war, as in life, extraordinary acts often arise from ordinary places, when preparation meets opportunity, and when skill meets courage.